All right, the big story. 5G spectrum auction finally concluded after 7 days and over 38 rounds of bidding. Briefing the nation, Union Telecom Minister Ashwini Vaishnaw has confirmed that the government is all set to garner around 1.5 lakh crore rupees. The government will get over 13,000 crore rupees upfront. Jio and Airtel have emerged as the highest bidders. Reliance Jio, the top spender, will shell out over 88,000 crore rupees for a total of 24,740 megahertz, while Airtel will spend around 43,000 crore rupees for 19,867 megahertz. Meanwhile, new entrant Adani Data Networks will be spending 212 crores on 400 megahertz in the millimeter wave. My colleague Danish Anand spoke earlier in the day with Telecom Minister Ashwini Vaishnaw. Listen in.
There are three trends that we have noticed in this auction. First trend is wherever the operators had gaps, they have taken spectrum in those gaps. For example, somebody had a gap in UP. That operator has taken some spectrum in the UP to fill that gap. Second trend that we noticed is that the response is across all bands, 700, 800, 900, almost all the bands that we have got very good response. That shows that the operators are now seriously looking at improving the quality of service. The third trend that we have noticed, which is in line with the global trend, is that the millimeter wave, 26 gigahertz, that has a very interesting use case, which is the fixed wireless access, FWA. So FWA is very good for the urban areas where from the network, if you have to take the network to an apartment, instead of laying a fiber there, you can take it wirelessly at a very good bandwidth. Even though the range is small for millimeter wave, it's 300, 400 meters, that kind of range, less than a kilometer. Still, the kind of bandwidth that you can get without digging the roads, that's a good thing. That is called fixed wireless access, FWA. And that is a very good, interesting use case, which we will see in India also with this.
So how soon can we expect the services to start?
So the auction is completed today. And within next 10 to 12 days, we would have completed all the allocation, the payment of upfront fee, everything, practically all the formalities which are required as post-auction process, we would have completed. And the operators are also working in sync with us, and they have also started installing equipments across the country. So we are planning somewhere in October, we should be ready for launch of 5G in the country.
All right, to understand what really we can see as a result of this auction, what are the kind of bids telling us about plans of telecom companies? I'm joined now by Mahesh Uppal, Director of Comfirst, and R. Chandrashekhar, former President NASSCOM. Welcome to both of you, and thank you so much for speaking with us today. Mahesh, let me begin with your take. Everyone is talking about the 700 megahertz band and you know how it's indicating a very serious intent on 5G. Can you break that down for us?
Sure, I'll try. You see, there is no doubt that 700 megahertz spectrum is very valuable spectrum precisely because it has a very long range, in contrast to the millimeter waves that the minister was just recently discussing in your program. So it does mean that if you do have spectrum in the 700 megahertz, you will be able to to roll out your services with far fewer towers and in less time. So this is all very good. And 5G certainly will need all the help that it gets, because as we are aware, 5G currently the main business case for 5G is for enterprise and industry level applications. And so the action that we will see in the coming months, I would think at least, would be more at the level of industry, particularly in some specific industries, manufacturing, logistics, aviation, ports, etc. And as far as retail use of 5G is concerned, I think we'll need to wait for a while. But I think it is very, very reassuring that Jio has taken spectrum in the 700 megahertz band, which will make it easier for 5G rollout to take place. and at a scale where even individual users will be able to use 5G.
Mr. Chandrashekhar, the question always for the Indian telecom space is affordability. Are consumers going to be willing to pay the premium that 5G perhaps will command? Can telcos improve their ARPUs with the kind of money they've spent? Do you think those challenges still persist, and actually pricing this will be the tricky part?
Well, Tamanna, first, good evening to all your viewers and to you and to Mahesh. The thing is that as far as 5G is concerned, it's not just a question of connectivity, it's also a question of the use cases, what kind of uses it will be put to. And I think to look at it through the traditional lens of telecom as to will people pay this amount or not, or will people pay an enhanced amount or not, is probably not the right way to look at 5G. As far as 5G is concerned, its value lies in the kind of services which it can support and the value that they bring, and how much those services are worth to the people who are the recipients of that service. These could be in things like, healthcare or education or any of the IoT kind of applications. There are a large number of such instances which provide extremely valuable services. So it's not perhaps impossible to visualize differential pricing between the 5G services and the normal vanilla type of telecom services. And I think there is sufficient headroom there, depending on how quickly and how good the identification of use cases is. So I think that is my first response to the affordability question. Because India, we all know, and we must keep in mind always, that we are a country which lives in several centuries at the same time. It has often been said. And telecom companies which provide services through the length and breadth of the country, from the most densely populated urban areas to the most remote and sparsely populated rural areas, actually have to cater to all of them. The very rich, the highly demanding consumers, the corporate consumers at one end of the spectrum, not a different kind of spectrum, the range. And at the lower end, people who basically have only 2G and whose ability to pay is very low. So it's also difficult for telecom companies to completely stop 2G services overnight and switch to 4G and 5G. So all of these add to the complexity for the telecom companies. But I think the good news from this auction is that all the three players have bid for the important 5G bands. All the three of them have taken large chunks of spectrum in the 26 gigahertz, the 3.3 gigahertz bands, and have signaled their intention to pursue it on an all-India basis. So they have not confined it to only a few circles. And as Mahesh ji just now mentioned, the additional 900 megahertz for which Reliance Jio has taken 2 blocks, that is 10 megahertz, all across the country, indicates their seriousness not only in respect of 5G, but in respect of rural coverage as well. Whereas the other players, the inference could be that their strategy is to go more for pockets, and pockets that are economically remunerated. So there is a differentiated strategy, and part of it is also perhaps attributable to the fact that Reliance also has a strong interest in the content business, and for them, combining content and connectivity is probably leads to a very different business model and a very different set of priorities. So that's my overall take.
From Mr. Chandrashekhar, from the government's point of view, in terms of the success of the auction, because previous iterations of the last few auctions have not really been that successful. Would you say this was a successful round of auctions? Are they going to get more than was expected? And is it also, in a sense, pointing to the fact that these companies are now more optimistic about this business model?
All of the above and some more, because, first of all, I think participation was good, which shows that the reserve price was realistic after the 30% cut by the cabinet from the previous round where participation was very low. So that is one definitive aspect. The second is that if you look at the availability, I think all the spectrum that was available was put on the block, and therefore there was no mad scramble for spectrum and people or telecom companies wanting to hoard spectrum because you never know whether when you need it, you will get it. So they have, it's very clear also from the auction that each company came with a very clear strategy of how much spectrum it wants, in which band and in which circles. So that is also quite evident. And since 26 gigahertz and 3.3 gigahertz or 3,300 megahertz, that it was the first time it was being auctioned. I think that has been hugely successful. Of course, I think pricing part was of lesser interest in my view because frankly, there was enough spectrum going around. The price was reasonable and each one took what they needed and left what they didn't need. And the result was that there is still unsold spectrum available for future use. The only place where there was competition was in one band, that is 1800 megahertz, in one circle, that is East UP, and everywhere else it was at the reserve price. So in these three bands of 26 gigahertz and 3.3 gigahertz and 900 megahertz, out of the 1.5 crores, 1.34 crores was from these three bands. The rest of it, as the minister himself mentioned, was gap filling. People looked at where they needed a little more spectrum and just took a little bit whatever they needed. The 600 megahertz and the 800 megahertz saw no claimants this time around. And so I think this round of auctioning, I think, has led to some, I would say, very rational behavior, both on the part of the government and on the part of the telcos. Finally, I do want to say one other thing, that, the National Digital Communications Policy has one very, very important sentence, which somehow doesn't seem to have attracted the attention it ought to have, where it said that the government will prioritize universal coverage over revenue maximization. To my mind, that's a very significant pronouncement, and for the first time ever has figured in those words in the policy. And I think this is what walking the talk looks like, when clearly the government has prioritized universal coverage and faster coverage.
Right.
So
Mahesh, I want to ask you just a very basic question from the point of view of users / viewers. Many say that even though we have 4G coverage availability, the actual quality of service doesn't often feel like 4G from the user experience. Can we expect better when the 5G services are finally rolled out?
Well, I wouldn't directly link 5G to 4G services. 5G, as we mentioned, has a different target user and target industry or set of industries. Yes, as the minister himself said, and Mr. Chandrashekhar has also pointed out, the operators have tried to augment spectrum where they felt they had less. So one could indirectly say that their quality of service would improve. But I think the quality of service issue is a much more complex issue and has several dimensions, besides the fact that quality of service is actually usually quite bad in very, very dense area, densely populated areas, or areas where the usage is very high, for example, in commercial centers like Connaught Place and Nehru Place and stuff like that. So I think there is the issue of quality of service needs a separate program, I might say. But yes,
I mean from the point of view of promise versus delivery.
Yes.
That was my point of comparison.
Yes. No, I think it would be unrealistic to say that this necessarily points to a dramatic improvement in the quality of service. I would not say that.
Right.
But I think the fact that operators have invested large sums of money and the fact that their revenues depend on, in one way or the other, on the quality of service as well, if not only, then they would have an incentive to improve the service as it is.
Fingers
And
crossed
we
that-
want the improvement, not just in the quality of service, but also the capacity of the service.
Absolutely.
Our 4G, Tamanna, is not really comparable to many countries' 4G itself.
Right.
I mean, our bandwidth.
So you've hit the nail on the head, Mahesh, of what my question is simply put. Will we get Asli wala 5G? So that's
Yes.
that's what we have to
Inshallah.
see. Let's hope. Thank you so much, Mahesh Uppal and
You're
R.
welcome.
Chandrashekhar, for joining us on the lead story this evening.